So, next topic. We got Resident Evil Revelations 2.
Resident Evil. So,
the upcoming episodic horror adventure will feature microtransactions, Capcom confirmed. A Capcom representative clarified that the microtransactions are included in the optional raid mode and not within the main campaign. So there's these crystals that you can buy. You can either collect blue ones in the game or like buy red ones, and then they like bring you back to life and all this stuff. Right. And the raid is like this more action oriented part of Revelations. So my question to you guys is, obviously Resident Evil went full action a couple games ago.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And this is just an even pure sign of just like, man, okay, they're making you pay so that you can like get extra lives to keep playing this action game. What happened to survival horror? Do you think it'll ever be back? And what are the key things that would be necessary for that to happen?
Before anyone answers that, I was at the preview event where they showed both of these. I got to sit down with the team and see each of them for about an hour for Barry's episode and for raid mode. And the microtransactions aren't as bad as everyone's making them out to be. Mm-hmm. They've been bad in some games before, but they're not time-based. You know, they don't like keep things locked that you can't otherwise purchase. And raid mode, if you played the original Revelations, is very similar to what that is. It's just additive content to what the story mode is bringing. Like, the story mode is the reason why you should be buying Revelations 2. Raid mode is just another way to keep playing if you really love the gameplay experience that they bring in Revelations 2. So they are adding 3 dungeons with each episode, and each of those dungeons has 6 missions. So it's essentially 18 missions per episode for across 5 episodes. That's just another additional gameplay experience into the narrative story elements.
And so that stuff is all free? But
that stuff's all included with the price. Yeah.
So the microtransaction is just buying more lives.
So like when you're
in the raid,
right?
In the
so
raid
when
mode,
you're
yes.
in raid mode, so there's like a base where you can customize your weapons and change out what kind of ammo you have and what you're bringing, what herbs you're bringing in and stuff like that. The microtransactions, I believe, allow you to unlock weapons faster.
Yeah.
So if you want all of the weapons available for raid mode right from the start, you can pay to unlock them all, or you can grind and unlock them as you go.
All right.
That's actually good insight.
Yeah.
Because we didn't go to that event.
Yeah, I mean, like when I saw the coverage come out, I was like, why are people demonizing this? It's not.
It's because microtransactions.
Well, just the word microtransactions.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been burned by microtransactions, but I think now we're kind of over that hill where developers and marketers are like, okay, we have to be careful about how we message microtransactions.
Not pay go blast.
We're sitting,
tell you what,
down to some developers not even allowing you to use the words free to play in your coverage. It's like people making all kinds of memes about it and stuff. So I think we're past that point where now the marketing guys are wise to the fact that the audience is like pissed about it. So they're being much more thoughtful about the way that they're implementing it. At least in the AAA space. I mean, the mobile scene's a whole different ballgame. But
yeah.
What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I think Andrea has some salient points there. I mean, I think that we talked about this on Colin and Greg Live this morning, which was, these things are put into games because people use them. And I wonder if we're the very engaged hardcore gamer that consumes a lot of content, and I'm not even talking about games, but consumes a lot of written editorial, consumes a lot of video, opinions, podcasts, if we kind of overestimate our power in terms of commerce for some of these games, and I think sometimes we do, I think that something like this might not be that offensive to a lot of people that buy Resident Evil Revelations 2, and that we overestimate its offensiveness, and I think that the evidence for that is everywhere in the industry. I think that everyone hates day one DLC, but it keeps coming. Everyone hates season passes, they keep coming. And why does this keep happening? Because people are buying them.
People keep buying them, exactly.
Everyone hates the idea of these things until it's in the game they love and want it. And that's the thing. So it's easy for me to be like, day one DLC for NBA whatever, that's stupid. But when it's day one DLC for us WWE, I'm like, oh yeah, buy it. I want that. You know what I mean? That's the whole rigmarole.
And Revelations 2 is being released episodically, and it's $25 if you buy the season pass. So that's a lot of content for not that much money, And if you're a Resident Evil fan, I mean, you're gonna want to play this. I mean, the dual narrative of having Barry and Natalia, and then having Moira and Claire and how they intersect and how they work through the same level but in different ways. I mean, it's really interesting what they're doing with it. So, like, if you guys are interested in Resident Evil, don't get hung up on the microtransactions.
That's
the
the thing
mode
is,
you
like,
probably won't play.
when I was doing the research for this, all the comments on the article were just like, "Oh man, I was gonna buy this and now I'm not gonna," or like, "This, dude, you totally fucked up." And it's like, really, guys? Like, this is not that bad. If it had to do with the campaign or it had to do with that stuff, that'd be one thing. But this is like, you're literally just paying to not have to grind.
And speaking to what you mentioned about the difference between action and survival horror, I asked them that exact same question. Like, I kind of put them in the hot seat and were like, you guys have been criticized a lot about turning it into a very action-heavy genre. And, you had Mikami come out last year with The Evil Within and say this is our return to survival horror, almost as if he was trying to take shots, at
Shots fired.
Capcom with Resident Evil.
Without action, though.
And they said very specifically, they said the story episodes are meant to be like, a legacy Resident Evil, very survival horror driven. You have to manage your resources, and that the raid mode is meant to be the more action heavy section of the game. So if you want that more action based combat feel to play raid mode, and that the story elements aren't going to be that way.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's interesting. What resonated with me, what you said about the comments was, well, that's the right idea in the sense that if it really is that offensive to you, then don't buy it. You know what I mean? Because that's the message you have to send, and we talked about that on Getting a Colin and Greg Live. Like, the people don't have the fortitude. A lot of people, including me, don't have the fortitude to be like, I'm angry about product X, and when product Y comes out, I'm not buying it. Product Y comes out 3 years later, I forget about it. Oh, it's great. So, like, you never send them the right message, and I think they're being sent messages, as we've said earlier, which is that, like, people are going to spend money on this. They've done their research. Capcom's not a stupid company. They did their market research. They have evidence that this works in Street Fighter or whatever else they've done it, and so here we're going to put in Resident Evil Revelations. The more egregious thing to me is that it's episodic at all. I feel like that was... I don't feel like... Maybe I just was ignorant of this because I played Revelations like 2 or 3 times in the last year or whatever. Revelations 2. And at like preview events. And I feel like the episodic thing just came out of left field, out of nowhere. Like, I don't know if that was like... That wasn't the case as far as I understand for like a long time. And then that like happened. So like that, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they said it like 2 years ago that's gonna be episodic, but I don't think that's the case. I think that they're looking and saying like, well, we were probably gonna sell this for $20, but we can make 25 if we put it episodically.
I talked to them about that too, and what they said was that they had a plan for the content, but they wanted to be able to release some of it sooner than they were going to be able to, and instead of, it sounded to me like, and this isn't like a quote, but almost as if they were going to have to delay it. And so instead of delaying, they decided to change the way that they were going to market it and put it out, an episode at a time to give them just a little bit more dev time to fix and polish some things, which is also why you can wait if you want and then buy it on disc as a single experience at the end of the 5th episode.
Right. Which is maybe we won't do that because we have to kind of probably stream it. But that would be what I want to do. I just in terms, I agree with you in the sense that I don't find this very egregious. I just find this kind of a systemic thing that's happening. I find the episodic thing a little weirder to me. The thing is that with everything, with mobile phones and tablets are like a lost cause. I mean, that's why I don't play games there at all, because it's that shit is just out of control with the free to play market. I mean, we've talked about Plants vs Zombies 2, which I love, and how I would have loved to just give them $20 if they just shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
But like they wouldn't let me pay for it, and then they just keep bothering me. So you got nothing. You get nothing now out of me. And so like that's the more ironic part of free to play, and more ironic part of microtransactions is that you have to get people like me, the people that just want to be old, curmudgeonly fucking dudes that just don't want to leave their house.
The time gates and free to play are the worst thing that was ever invented. I would rather just give you a lump sum up front to unlock it, but the time restrictions, like you have to wait to like get another life, and like that's the stuff that really bothers me. That's not the kind of free to play or the microtransactions you're seeing in Resident Evil.
Yeah,
no.
What you were saying about like the more AAA games and stuff that they've been stopping doing that. I've seen that, and that's good. But I was making a joke about Peggle Blast earlier. My God, I love Peggle. And I'm like the first one on mobile. I'm like, my God, I love this game. And then Blast out of nowhere comes out.
It's terrible.
Like, this is great. Like a new one. And honestly, the gameplay in it better than the other Peggles. Like it's vertical now instead of horizontal, and like they made all these like little changes that are just awesome. And I was enjoying it. Then all of a sudden, it's like I ran out of lives or whatever, and it's just like, oh, you need to pay for it. I'm like, all right, I'd buy this game like for $2 or $5 or whatever it was, but no. That wasn't an option. It's like, invite your friends on Facebook. And I'm like,
EA's the worst with that
wow,
shit.
What is this, 2008? Like, that's really weird. And it's like, I guess I'm just out of touch with that because, like, I've never been a part of the Farmville, You know, like those guys.
But you know what made me understand it? And I'm with you guys. Like, I hate microtransactions in general, but I talked to some people at PAX South about Candy Crush. Because I was like asking, you know, like, what are you playing? And this one guy said Candy Crush. And I was like, okay, like, Candy Crush clearly is a phenomenon. Lots of people are playing it. You know, my mom is playing it. I said, so tell me, just curious, how much money have you spent on Candy Crush? And I was thinking like $30, $40. How much do you think he said?
0.
250.
I'd say 0.
Well, if we're going by Price is Right rules, they win, but it was $200.
Oh,
Man.
bummer.
He spent $200 on Candy Crush, which is why freemium in the mobile space is
Yep.
never going away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
You know?
I mean,
And I
that
think
makes
they call-
total sense.
They call people like him whales, I think, in the industry too. That like
There's
that-
a lot
that
of
fat?
people that spend that much.
Yeah.
you
It's not a
know?
fat joke.
Well,
That's not a fat joke.
so here's my
No,
problem with
no
Pagel
fat
Blast
joke.
is I was like, all right, you guys are making it difficult for me to like this, but I'm going to keep playing because I do enjoy the gameplay that much. So I would, you know, keep trying, and then when I'd lose, it's like you have like 5 lives, and then you have to wait 24 hours
Ugh.
unless you invite friends and do all this like shit. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So
It's
then,
so corny.
So then
I've
you
just
went
been
and
waiting.
made
I've been-
Facebook accounts.
Well, no, I would totally do that. But no, I would wait the 24 hours, and the next time I'm sitting there doing nothing, I would try to beat that level. It's gotten to the point that I got so far in the game now that I reached this challenge where you have to beat 5 levels in a row, like back to back to back to back to back. And it's if you don't do that, if you lose on one loss, you go back to the beginning. And I'm like, you guys designed this so that I have to pay for the power ups.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, that's unacceptable.
Pay to win.
Like, it is literally
Pay
pay
to
to
play.
win. And it's so upsetting to me where I'm like, man, I want Pickle 2. I just want to buy Pickle 2.
You can. It's like $4
It's
right now.
not. It's not on mobile.
Oh, it's not a mobile.
Yeah.
No,
Well, buy it
it's
on
that's
not.
what
PS4.
I was
No.
But I'm going to buy
Xbox
it
One.
PS4. Yes.
Wasn't the question though, what happened to survival horror?
It was, but you know what?
And you want the answer?
Yeah, go
Because
for
I've been quiet on this one.
Yeah.
The answer is that survival horror sucks, and it's always
Oh my
sucked.
god, you're out of your mind.
And you all got
had a
y'all
resurgence last year.
y'all drank this Kool-Aid thinking it was good back in the day because the controls were terrible, and then good controls came around. And you played other games, and the industry evolved, and now everybody goes back and tries to make
Yeah, but
it survival horror, and it doesn't.
That's
doesn't click.
weird. That's a
It
weird
doesn't click.
statement, Greg.
It doesn't
Because
click.
to me, Dead Space is arguably the best. The original Dead Space is arguably the best survival horror game.
But that
I've ever
one
played.
walks that line. We've talked about this before. Is it action or survival horror? And I agree with you. It's more survival horror than action. And then
Yeah, I
Dead
think-
Space 2 went all action, which I enjoyed more. But I think the fact that there's a debate there means it's not just straight survival horror.
I would say it's survival horror enough that, like, I mean, at least I would
I
put
think
it in
it's.
survival horror.
I think it's straight survival horror. I don't think that like the combat precludes that from being survival horror, just based on the nature of that. The ship. What was it called? The Ishimura.
Ishimura.
Was the mansion. You just went all over the place and then back again. I mean, it's just the fucking mansion in space.
Yeah, it's one
You
of
know?
those.
So that, like to me that I mean Dead Space. Don't even get me
The
started
ship
on Dead
is one of those things you had to backtrack so much that you get to know the ships.
corridors and
Yeah,
everything else,
exactly.
yeah.
And so it
I
is
love
just
Dead
like the
Space.
mansion where it's like it was a character of itself, and so it was awesome.
But I agree with you in the sense that tank controls were a product of the time and that they made the games arbitrarily harder and scarier. There's no doubt about that. I think that when you play, we were playing remastered, and the tank controls are gone now, or you don't have to play with them. And the game is a little more action oriented, but that doesn't mean Resident Evil isn't a survival horror game.
I
you
feel
know?
like
Did you
people
play Isolation?
Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
I
haven't
played
played
the
that
I played the demos enough, and then when I heard it just kept on going too long, I was like, all right, then I'm good. I've played enough.
I know a lot of people that had a lot of good things to say about that game. I mean, like the idea that survival horror is dead. I think is just. I mean, come on, don't be silly. It's definitely not dead.
The question
Outlast
a lot of people:
was huge.
what happened to survival
Amnesia
horror?
is
Right?
huge.
True.
Resident Evil
These are all
5
true
happened in
points.
survival horror.
Well, no, just what happens is that I think that
Game sucks.
the games that people when they think of survival horror, they think of the original Resident Evil, they think of Resident Evil 2, and those were a product of this control scheme, and that those games probably wanted to be action games, and the control scheme wouldn't allow them to be it, so they became this survival horror.
I don't agree with you. I think that Mikami made Resident Evil based on Sweet Home, which was a Famicom game that was or at least partially inspired by that Famicom game in the spirit of going to a house and kind of walking through the different rooms and stuff like that and going back and backtracking and stuff. I think the game was what he wanted it to be. And even though there were technical and control limitations on not even DualShock 1 on the original controller. But what happened to survival horror, I mean Resident Evil 5 happened to survival horror. Resident Evil 5 was a travesty. In terms of like what Resident Evil is.
co-op.
As an action game, it's fine. It's a fine game. It's
fine.
as an action game.
Fine.
It's a fine game. I beat it, whatever. It is what it is. But when I played that, especially after Resident Evil 4, which was a masterpiece, to play Resident Evil 5 and be like, what the hell is like? Who told you to do this?
Somebody in marketing that wanted to sell more games.
But I mean, Resident Evil 4 was not a commercial failure. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna say Resident Evil 4 sold better. Obviously, came to GameCube. It was on PS2 later. Mikami never cut his own head off. By the way, when that happened, if we all remember, he said he was gonna cut his own head off with a chainsaw if it ever happened. But Resident Evil 5 was the beginning of the end of an action-oriented, and it wasn't the first one, but it was in the action-oriented, this is what it is now. And then Resident Evil 6, just in the trailers, I was like, I don't even want anything to do with this game. I never even played it because I'm a Resident Evil fan. I like Resident Evil. And so I think that happened. That's why Dead Space was so refreshing in some ways, in the sense that even though it was really around the same time as Resident Evil 5 and long before Resident Evil 6, that it captured that Mikami kind of essence of horror and fright, which I don't think Dead Space 2 did, which is why I stopped playing.
You felt powerful in it.
Yeah, it was like, that's not really the idea. The bigger thing to me is that I think we're losing sight of, and we talked about this again, is that when I played Remake Remastered again, I lost sight of the fact as a kid that these games are adventure games. And like that, I never thought about it that way. And so maybe it's like the collecting and the puzzle solving. It's almost like a Tomb Raider game. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like an Uncharted game in a way. Like with these like finding tablets and putting them in places and solving puzzles and stuff like that. That was also lost. And so I think that essence of limited combat, limited ammo, and all that kind of stuff is one part of it, but also the world exploring and how you interact with the world is another thing. That's why Resident Evil 5 wasn't scary, because it was this huge swath of space, and you killed more people in Resident Evil 5 in like the first half an hour than you killed in Resident Evil 4.
Well, what do you think about what they're doing with a game like Until Dawn? You know,
that's a very exciting game.
Taking, you know, that horror genre and giving it a new gameplay element, making it more story-driven, more narrative-based instead of action-based. Like, I mean, there's really, from what I've played, there really wasn't combat at all.
No, it doesn't look like there will be. It looks awesome. That's the whole point. And this is what I go back to, just in the fact of what happened is I think technology caught up with these games. Original Resident Evil, you're, stars is it? And that's what they are, right? You're like this elite group of motherfuckers who land and you have 3 bullets. What the fuck are you talking about? And then you're bringing up like Dead Space. You brought up Outlast. You know Outlast.
Outlast,
yeah. Outlast is awesome. That's a great game.
And these are games where it makes sense that those are survival horror in the way of their horror games even. And I mean survival too, just how you want to kick it around. But the fact of like the narrative makes sense for why you're in that selection. And that's why I love Until Dawn, where you're just a flashlight and which way do you want to go, and it's you're on the run from this person. They're putting you in situations that make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's coming back though. I agree with Andrew. I think that there's evidence that it's coming back. I haven't played with Evil Within yet. Signs are that, from what I've heard, that is a Mikami game. That's great. I can't wait to play it. I have no fucking time to play anything. I want to play Alien Isolation too, because again, I like Alien. I like that whole world, well, the whole universe, I guess I should say. And I think that there's evidence that's coming back. I think Outlast was a great game. It was short. You know, you're a journalist. It's very incongruent in the way you deal with the world in terms of you're powerless. I think that's really cool as well. Although that game fell apart at the end. That game sucks at the end. Like most horror, like I think Rosemary's Baby, which is like one of the great horror movies of all time. The way that ends, like the last 5 minutes is awful.
Yeah.
Like they can't figure out how to end it. Same thing with The Shining, even though you know it's like you don't know how to end it, and that's a problem. That they can deal with that at a different time. But I think it'll come back. I was disappointed that Dead Space 2 went in that action-oriented way, because I felt like they actually captured it. I felt like it was theirs. You know, I'm surprised someone at EA and Visceral wasn't like, we got it. Like we got it. You know, like this is survival horror that everyone wants. And they let it go.
When the goalposts keep moving, your third installment has to still sell 6 million copies to get a fourth. You're like, all right, well.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But yeah, I just genetically just been thinking more about survival horror and what it is, and I feel like because of the adventure element of the game has been lost, which we were talking about with Remake. I'm like, I can't believe because I'm not a PC gamer and I didn't grow up a PC gamer. I didn't realize how adventure oriented these games are, and I think that is another piece of the puzzle that we have to really look at genetically, and like why these games work. It's not only the fear, and it's not only the limited ammunition. I mean, you say they go to there with 15 bullets. They go there with a full clip. They don't think they're going to be stuck there. It makes sense, I think, within the confines of it, but you know, there's more to it than that. And I think that the Evil Within, apparently, I can't speak to it personally, apparently gets it. You know, so it'll live again. I think the market's going to speak. I think the market spoke loud and clear with Resident Evil 6. I don't think that game did anything what Capcom wanted to do. And so hopefully they remake it. Hopefully they reboot it. And the next one is just Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think the market has become so splintered that trying to get these big publishers to sink a lot of development into a purist survival horror experience is just unrealistic, because it's such a cultist audience. You know, like I personally do not like survival horror games at all. Like for me, I love going to video games and feeling that, having that power fantasy,
Sure.
and being like a superhero and feeling like I can do things that I would never be able to do in real life. The idea of like I have to run from an enemy because I can't defeat it is not a fun gameplay experience for me, but I know that a lot of people really enjoy that kind of immersive gameplay, but I just don't think it's enough people that we're going to see it ever grow in a really sizable fashion outside of the indie scene.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't think you're wrong on that. I think, the Capcom marketers, for instance, with RE5, were probably seeing trends that were right. That if RE5 was RE4, well, it probably would have done better critically, but that's not what they really care about. In fact, Capcom would be happy if you gave a game a 1 if they sold 10 million copies, but I don't think they care. Just like any other company. So I think that they have to look at what matters most, and that brings us back to Revolutions 2. This might give them a bad name on Kotaku and IGN and all these places, but most of the people that are going to buy the game don't read those sites, and that's just the fact of the matter. You know what I mean? They listen to their friends, they watch YouTube, they're on Reddit, and if that like isn't really a big deal, then they're not going to care. So that's the way the trends go.
There you go.